You ever go into a guitar shop and you want to try out one of the guitars, but you're kind of afraid that anyone might hear you and judge your playing? You might hear others in the guitar stores ripping on some hot lick that they've probably just memorized, honestly. But it freaks you out. It makes you sweat bullets, but you look at that Les Paul on the wall and you think, man, I want to try that out. Maybe you wait around until there's no one there, but still, you gotta plug that thing in. Let me show you just 5 ideas that you can string together when you're in the guitar store and earn some respect. But also, we're gonna learn some important concepts along the way. It sounds something like this. So step 1 is we're just going to combine the chord to establish the key that we're playing in, and then we're going to use a little bit of scale to, create that really interesting sound where we have both chord and scale. So let's just take an easy G major chord, but instead of just a G major chord, let's impress these people around us here, right? By adding an interesting note onto it. How about we add this A right here? So if I take the G, I can take the G with any fingers you normally use, and just move that finger up to that A. It sounds really cool. Now we have, you could say like a G add 9 or a sus2, something like that. And then what scale shape are we in right here? Because again, we want to combine the chord with the scale. Now we could play any lick here, but let's use G major pentatonic because that's less commonly played. And so, while everyone else is ripping on minor pentatonic, we're going to pull out that sweet major pentatonic that just might make people go, that was interesting, that was kind of cool. And not only that, but it's actually really easy in this position because G major pentatonic open position is easy shape open position. It's very easy. You might know it already as E minor pentatonic open position, but it's the same. It's the same notes, but the root is in a different place. It's here, right? So now you could play any lick you like on this phrase, on this shape. I'm just gonna improvise something now. It'll be different than what was in the demo, but who cares? The point is you wanna be able to pull this out of your pocket without having every specific note memorized. So here's a G chord. There's a bit of that cool chord. And then maybe I go back to the G, right? But maybe instead of going to this G, let's do step 2. Let's play the G in a different place. That's always cool. We want to hear things ascend. So maybe now we play the G up here. This is a very great voicing for G. Sounds very rich. It's still just a G chord, but I've got my pinky on that A there, right? Listen to how that rings. That is just that is kind of the G chord that makes people go, whoa, what's that? That's not a basic G chord. Okay, so we've got something like, that was the step 2. That was that G with the A on top, right? So let's link a third concept now. We're gonna play some double stops. Double stops always sound great, especially in major pentatonic. It helps us to highlight the harmony of the chord underneath, but also just hearing those 2 notes at once just sounds so interesting. The harmony of each step along the way. Now I happen to have been here, and I look down at the fretboard and I know the 3rd fret of the high E string there, that's a G, right? So I could play a standard, this is a really standard lick, a standard 6s lick. This is double stop in 6s. So if that's the G, I'm gonna reach down with my 2nd finger and grab this B note, which is 4th fret of the G string. Now we could do some hybrid picking there. We could do picking fingers there. That sounds really good. Now we hear those 2 notes. We have the G and the B at the same time, and they're separated out. They're 6 apart if we count from B. B, C, D, E, F, G. That part is probably less important. The most important thing is just memorizing that when you have a root on the high E string, you have this 6s double stop, and you have this common, very common 6s double stop lick. It's always the same no matter where you start, right? If we did it on a different chord, it'd be C here. Doesn't really matter, you just find the root that you need and then you just play the same shape. It's just walking up the scale. The high string goes G, A, B. That's the scale, G major. And the lower string is going B, C, D. B, C, D, also notes of G major. So they're just following each other, right? So let's put 3 steps together. That's already pretty good. That's a bit of stuff, right? Remember that cool chord with the A on top? And it connects right there with the 6s. Now we've got something really interesting. And it's all just on a G chord, but we've combined 3 concepts. Let's combine a 4th. I looked down at the fretboard, I ended on my 6s, and one of the things I cannot help but to do here is to connect it to an arpeggio. This arpeggio, I think we've done on this channel, or I think we've definitely done it on our Patreon group. This one is a very David Gilmour, Pink Floyd one. It's a sus4 arpeggio. I visualize this triangle. If you like the caged system, you might think of this as a D shape. You might call it a D shape, because if we took this standard cowboy D shape and we moved it up, D becomes E, becomes F, becomes G. There's a G chord. Now we're going to play an arpeggio based on this shape. Remember, an arpeggio is just the notes of a chord played in succession. So rather than strumming it, we're going to play the notes in order, in some kind of order. Doesn't really matter, right? And we see that when I get to the top of that 6s, that previous lick, my fingers are kind of there. Now, they might not be the fingers that I would usually want for that lick, but that's okay. Because we're going to add an extra note before this basic G major arpeggio. Remember, we're trying to gain some respect here in the guitar store, so every step we're going to do, we're going to add a little bit of extra salt and pepper to it. And in this case, the salt and pepper is a sus4. So if that is a G triad, we could say, right? Sus4 is pinky comes down. So I'm gonna put pinky down, and I play that note, and I'm gonna release pinky, and then I get that note, right? So now I have a G sus4 arpeggio. That's a nice arpeggio. So we came from our 6s. Now whatever fingers you use for the G sus4 arpeggio, I might even just go like, just try to visualize the chord shape and outline it note for note. Let's take the arpeggio one step further. Again, we might as well follow the kind of standard David Gilmour thing. We're gonna drop down 2 steps. We're gonna go C, B. That's full G major scale. Now I'm saying that's full G major scale, but honestly, when I'm thinking about this lick, I'm not even really thinking about that. It's a lick, right? You just memorize it. Whatever chord you want it for, if you want it for C, it looks the same, it's just moved up, right? Okay, so let's see if I can remember. What do we have? We have 4 steps out of 5 now, right? So I'm gonna see if I can combine 4 steps. We started with a G chord, but we fancied it in open position. And then we went to open G major pentatonic, just improvise a lick. But resolve it using this chord up here. Okay? And now we look down and we visualize, there's 6s right there. The standard 6s lick. And then we look down and we go, it's my favorite sus4 arpeggio. Thank you, Pink Floyd. Tasty, okay? Now let's do one more step. Let's do 5 steps. 5 is plenty. Also, you see, we're kind of moving up the fretboard further and further, so we're exploring the fretboard more. And also, it's a good way to test out whether you like the guitar itself by playing around the fretboard. So let's just go all the way up. And let's do a completely different concept. Let's do some very interesting chord shapes that are easy to play, but combine notes up the fretboard with open strings at the same time. So what I played in the demo there is I played this very neat D chord. Think of it this way. If I took this G chord, now careful, this is a specific G chord here, It looks like cowboy G, and you could call it cowboy G, but it's the cowboy G that has the two guys at the top here, right? It just turns out that we could move this shape up all the way to that would be the 9th and 10th here. And the open strings, we have a D string open, we have a G string open, which D, E, F, G, that would be like a D sus4 chord. We got so many sus4s. I love sus4s. That was just kind of a fluky sus4 because the sus4 is the open G there. That just rings so interesting when you have high-pitched ones with the ringing of the open strings. Now magic happens here. We could just take this exact same shape, move it down 2 frets, and it's what chord? D becomes C. And it just works out. The open strings, the D and the G, they ring along with the C. So we have a D chord. You can show it off by just plucking through it. And then C. It sounds way more complex than it is, right? It's actually easy to play because you probably know this chord shape. Let's do, this is part of step 5, we'll say. We'll do 2 more of these really cool chords that are also equally easy to play. Go to your bog standard cowboy C chord, but take it up 2 frets. Ooh, that's a nice one. That's actually in lots of songs. You might have played that one before. When you take a C chord and you move it up 2 frets, it becomes a D chord of sorts. Again, we got some open strings ringing in there, and we can just take that down 2 frets. That's just a normal C, right? So what were those crazy chords? We got, this is a G shape, if you like the cage system, but it's actually a D chord. C chord, for G shape C chord. C shape D chord. You can see why I don't really like the cage system, the naming system. It's very confusing. Right? And then we got to resolve, right? Because we started on G. It's going to sound very satisfying to resolve. So let's say this is our last step. I think this is actually step 6 now, but whatever. So we're going to play a G, but we're going to finish with one last lick to make it sound extra cool. Just a little bit of spice on the end. Put a little blue note in there so that it's not quite so sweet. And then strum the G. Now keep in mind, I'm going to have the tabs for that demo section at the beginning of this video here. So if you want the specific tabs of what I played in that demo section, you can get that there. Plus practice tips that will show you in greater detail all of these steps that we string together here. But let's see, I'm going to try it one more time from the top. Don't forget, we got all the tabs on our Patreon, plus hundreds more video lessons that go into greater detail of the theory and the skills and the techniques that you need to become a better guitar player today. And we also have this video right here. You want to try out something for free. But Patreon's also free for 7 days. So, I mean, why not? My name is Blue Morris, and I'll see you next week.